So good morning. Good morning everyone in the audience. Good morning to you watching on Sverige Världens YouTube channel. This morning started really bad. We just got the news of an explosion in Kabul, and it seems like there are up till now about 15 people who have died. And that really shows the necessity of the discussion we are going to have today here about the peace process and the implications on the peace, on the press freedom in Afghanistan. My name is Martin Schibbye. I am editor-in-chief for Blankspot, and I have been given the honor by Reportrar Without Borders and the Swedish Afghan Committee to lead this seminar and shed some light that helps us all to maybe navigate the murky waters of peace ahead of us. And as the title for this seminar says, the focus should be on how the press freedom is affected by the peace process. Because during this spring, we have moved from talks about talks to actual talks and small steps towards a peace process. But as many of you know, it's a very delicate framework for this peace process. The Taliban have relucted to include and negotiate with the current Afghan government, but are negotiating with the US. And the Afghan president in his turn has said that he's prepared to talk about peace, but not to risk a disaster. And there is also a growing concern among Afghan journalists, among civil society and many NGOs on what a peace agreement would contain and how it could limit the freedom of expression and the freedom of peace. So today we have a panel that has on-the-ground experience and can witness about this process and to hear their thoughts on the process. And if you in the audience want to say anything, don't wait until the end. Just raise your hand at any time, and we will include your questions in this seminar. But we will start with Vali Aryan. You are an Afghan journalist for Tolo TV. And after reporting about the Taliban's systematic abuses, your life was in danger more than once, and eventually you had to leave, and you are now the fifth icon resident of the city of Malmö. And we will start this seminar by showing a short clip from SVT that gives you all a background to Vali's work and about what we are here to discuss.
طالبان با ورودشان به این شهر وحشتی برپا کردند. از تیرباران
یک لاگر رئیس زمانی که کودک بودم بسیار علاقه داشتم یک دکتر باشم و اما حادثه 11 سپتامبر 2001 در امریکا رخ داد. زمانی که با تلویزیون نگاه میکردم به یک بارگی تصمیم و تغییر خورد که ما باید یک خبرنگار باشم و بتوانم درد و بحرانی که در افغانستان دامنگیر مردم است اطلاع رسانی بکنم.
Vali Aryan har sedan 2008 bevakat kriget i Afghanistan för den kommersiella tv-kanalen Tolo. Hans vardag gick ut på att parera hot och våld i ett land där inte alla accepterar fria medier.
با جنگ سالاران، زورمندان در افغانستان مواجه میشی و از جانب دیگه هم با گروه های هراس افغان مواجه میشی و چالش دیگه هم سنت های حاکم در محل.
Som krigskorrespondent skildrade han krigets otäcka verklighet under många år. Men när han 2015 rapporterade om talibanernas attacker mot civila och våldtäkter mot kvinnor i staden Kunduz korsade han en farlig gräns.
اینجا خوابگاه دختران و یا لیلی دخترانه دانشگاه کندوز است.
این گزارش را که من تهیه کردم با واکنش تند طالبان روبرو شد و دستور به تمامی افراد طالبان داده شد که هر جا ولی آریان خبرنگار طلو به چنگتان میفته زنده باید باشه، در غیر از او سرش باید قطع شود.
För att göra sig av med honom attackerade talibanerna tv-kanalen Tolo i början av 2016.
در این حمله 7 همکار ما جان باختن و 25 همکار دیگه ما زخم برداشتن.
Även om Afghanistans grundlag ska skydda pressfriheten har regeringen enligt Human Rights Watch gjort lite för att utreda våldsbrott mot journalister. För Wali Arian blev hoten så påtagliga att han var tvungen att lämna landet. Sedan april är han fristadsförfattare i Malmö och här i Sverige kommer han att kämpa för att jobba med det han älskar.
خبرنگاری عشق ما بوده. بیشتر از فامیلم مدرسه‌های کارم بودم. پس چگونه میشه که به یک بارگی دست بردار از یک حرفه مسلک شوی که همیشه با او بودی و همیشه مثل عشق به کارت، به گزارشت، به گزارش‌هایت پرورش دادی.
عبدالولی آریان، تولونیوس، کندوز.
So, Valerian, you brought me this news this morning of the attack. What are your feelings being here in Sweden and following the news from Afghanistan right now?
As a journalist, I made a good network in Afghanistan with Afghan military, with Afghan officials. Even Taliban also follow me on Twitter. And they publish very easy their press release, and they are very active, more than government spokespersons. But when I'm talking with my friends, they are sharing everything that's happened inside Afghanistan. Today, when I wake up at the morning, I open my Twitter, I saw the heavy explosion happened in Kabul. It's very close to presidential place, and it's very close to Afghanistan Defense Ministry. And the attack happened very close to Shamshad TV. It's a private TV. Last year also, ISIS fighters attacked on that TV channel. It shows the tough situation in Afghanistan. It shows freedom of expression and freedom of media. Even democracy is under a very serious risk in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much, and we will get back to those topics. Anna Ek, the second panelist, you are the country director of the Swedish Afghan Committee, and you just got back from Afghanistan and Kabul. And you will also, we have asked the panelists to also show a picture that means something for them as an introduction of who they are and their experiences from Afghanistan. So before we go into current events, you choose this picture.
Yes, I did. And I chose it because out of two reasons. One is because you see that it's a radio station. And radio, I would say, is still one of the most important ways of having contact with the outside world when you live, especially the majority of the population in Afghanistan live in the rural areas where there is very, very little access to news and contact with the outside world. So that is the first reason. The second reason is it's actually one of our projects. It's a boys activist group for gender equality, and I have their names. It's Sinan, Mustafa, and Bilal, who are invited to the local news station Radio RSO, talking about why men need to be also committed for gender equality. So I really, really like this picture because it also shows an image of Afghan people as wanting improvements in the country. Not everyone. I guess that a normal Swedish person in Sweden would think that there are only Taliban and warlords in Afghanistan, and that's not the truth. So this image is very, very important to also describe how Afghanistan looks like.
But just talking about radio, and you also mentioned that also the Taliban and the warlords, they also have the radio stations.
Yeah.
I mean, how important is the radio to get information and news in Afghanistan?
It is very important, and just as like you say, I guess sometimes it would be hard to know which radio station to trust. because, as you said, warlords have their own radio stations. The Taliban have a very heavy propaganda machinery. Sometimes you live in an area, if it is controlled by, for example, the Taliban, you don't have access to internet or radio during many, many hours of the day. So, of course, it is hard sometimes to trust the source that you're listening to, but then you have also the phenomenon of as a human being, you want to know, well, I want to get to know the outside world or what is going on in the next village. So you go to the local mosque and you listen to what the mullah has to tell about what has happened in the region or maybe even in big politics, I don't know. So the mullah is also actually a source of information that many Afghans trust.
We'll also get back to this.
Yeah.
And our third panelist, Erik Halcher, you are the president of Reporters Without Borders in Sweden. You have made many trips to Afghanistan and also been editor-in-chief for the Swedish Afghan Committee's newspaper. Tell me about the picture you have chosen for.
Thank you, Martin. I'm a bit ashamed because you had your names of the people on the picture. I tried to find the names of these girls, but I have their names on the hard drive in Stockholm. So if anyone wants to know their names, I can provide them. They are two girls from a girls' high school in Shulgara district in Balk, whom I met in 2013 when I did a story for Afghanistan, the magazine you have here. What happened, well, the story is to illustrate the complicity of being a journalist, a foreign journalist, but also I think a local journalist. We go to this school thanks to the SCA local personnel, and we have to do this story. And in the middle of the meeting with the headmasters, two policemen comes into the office screaming and shouting. And I didn't understand what they were talking about, but they were absolutely furious against the SCA local personnel, but also the headmasters. And I was a bit worried, and I told the SCA, my SCA colleague, that we can just leave, it's not important. And after a while, I got to understand that they were really angry at SCA and the school that they had brought me to this school with women, with the girls, because around in the hills around the school there were lots of Taliban. So they said basically you had put like a gun, what do you say, a target in the forehead of these girls. So they meant that them, SCA and me had put these girls in danger, and also from me as a foreign white person being there. And that was also for me an eye-opener that it's not just, you just don't go and interview people. I mean, it's much more complicated, of course. The school is still standing, it's working, it's fine. I think even SCA has turned it over to the local authorities, so no one died that I know of. But it's a very complex situation.
It also highlights the, as you say, the difficulties to work as a journalist, both a foreign reporter, but also as a local reporter. Yeah. With your position today as president in Reporters Without Borders, could you just give us an overview of how is the situation for press freedom in the country going into these peace talks now?
It is bad, but it's also better. It's complex. We have free media. We have lots of TV stations, radio stations, newspapers that didn't exist before. So there are lots of a variety of media and journalists working, and there are more journalists than before working. But the conditions they work in are terrible. I mean, Vali here is a living example of this. And last year there were 15 journalists killed, more than any country in the world. And this year we have 4 journalists dead already. So it's I would say together with Syria and Iraq, Mexico, one of the most dangerous countries in the world for journalists. So there's lots to be done, and we need to protect press freedom and as journalist security in these peace talks.
So we have a backdrop of the situation. You know the panelists, and I would like to go more into now the peace process and the risks and challenges and opportunities. And I would like to start to ask the panel, I mean, what would you be prepared to sacrifice for peace? There is a song by Thåström, That's My Turn. Is it really peace we want at any thinkable price? And it came to mind preparing this seminar, listening to this song. I mean, let's say you're at the table. What can be compromised and what is really important to be protected? What are the red lines in your mind going into these talks? I think we can start with Valerian.
I'm sorry for my bad English. Now I want to help from my friend to translate my speech. میفهمین که سومین روز هفتمین دور گفتگوهای صلح میان نماینده امریکا و نمایندگان طالبان در قطر جریان داره.
Of the seventh round of peace talks, which is going on in Doha, in Qatar, between the USA Special Envoy, Zulmay Khalilzad, and the Taliban's representatives.
اما هیچگاه از این 7 دور گفتگوها بر رسانه‌ها معلومات دقیق دادن نشده که چی گذشت در گفتگوهای صلح. آنچه که گفته میشه فقط ادعاهایی است که از افراد دیگه بر رسانه‌ها میرسن، نه نقل قول مستقیم و از درون نشست.
And the 7 rounds of peace talks, we have never heard any exact reports during what really had happened or have happened or happening down there. Everything we have heard is kind of claiming of the others, which is from the second hand.
با این همه ما خوشبین هستیم که حداقل پس از 40 سال در افغانستان صلح بیه و میدونیم هر جنگ با قربانی های پایان داره و صلح بدون قربانی ممکن نیست.
Although we know
هر صلح با دادن قربانی به میان میه و هر جنگی را باید پایان بخشید.
Although we know that every war, every peace needs sacrifices, and there is always an end to a war.
اما آزادی بیان و آزادی رسانه ها از بزرگترین دستاوردهای حکومت افغانستان، جامعه جهانی و مردم افغانستان در 18 سال پسین است که نمیشه بالای ازی معامله صورت بگیره. اگر معامله صورت بگیره ما به عقب برمیگردیم، هر چی که داشتیم از دست میدیم.
But the freedom of speech
and the freedom of speech and the freedom of press is one of the biggest achieved in Afghanistan. We are ready to give victims to end this war, but for how long Afghan people were killed, the journalists have been killed by Taliban and other insurgents inside Afghanistan. Yes, we are ready for peace, but freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and freedom of women, these are our red lines, cannot deal without Afghanistan people suggestion and their opinion in this case. If Taliban and US they make some limitation for this cases like on freedom of speech and freedom of media, we're going back. It's not good for our victims in this long way that we have achieved.
Erik Halkskär, what are your thoughts on the peace process and its implications for the local journalists?
I think what we have is a kind of a complex situation again. You have the United States negotiating with the Taliban. They are not the best examples for press freedom at the moment, neither of them. Sadly, I agree on everything that Wally says, but sadly, I think press freedom is at stake here. And also the Taliban, what they said last week, that they think that the media in Afghanistan is trying to miscredit them or even lie about what they say to paint them as badder than they are, as the Taliban says. So they actually said, starting from today, if media doesn't start to report better, making them look better, the Talibans, they will start to see them as military targets. I don't know about this. I don't know much about this attack this morning, but it was close to a TV station, so it could be one of the first examples of several attacks starting. And that's, of course, has to do with the peace talks. They are showing their power and what they can do to get their voices heard in these negotiations. I'm quite sure. So it's we have to be very cautious, and I think the negotiations will be much better off if there were other actors involved than not just the states and Talibans.
Are there any, lessons to be learned from other peace processes in other countries where actually journalists, local journalists or other journalist organizations have been included in the talks that you could learn from or draw inspiration from?
Good question. I don't know if there are. Of course, press freedom and journalists are involved in different as institutions in peace talks. I don't know if in other countries, but I don't know if they have had sort of media organizations involved in the negotiations. I don't know. But in Colombia, for example, media freedom and journalist security was sort of one of the pillars in the negotiations, but then we have to remember that FARC, the left-wing guerrilla, had already ceased to attack journalists a while back, so it was not as problematic and grave as in Afghanistan at the moment.
Anna Ek, as someone that just came back and had, I guess, discussing the peace process with many different actors. What are your thoughts? What do you bring with you from your recent trip on?
Yes, if I would dare to draw a very, very general conclusion, I would say that women fear the peace talks more than men do, because women know they are not represented in the negotiations, and the progress and the gains that have been made during the last 17 years, many of the women are fearful of what might happen. I know some of them would prefer to go outside of Afghanistan rather than live with oppression again. But of course, I'm also hopeful, because as I said in the beginning, there are so many people in Afghanistan who decide to go to work every day, who decide to take the struggle. Some journalists also, Wally, you have had to fled, but some of them try to find a way, and they've had the luck that they can stay for now, but you don't know what will happen after the peace talks, how the situation for journalists will change, and I really, really hope that press freedom is not forgotten either in the peace talks. But what I also would like to say is that the civilian population is excluded from the peace talks at the moment. It's not only the Afghan government who is not really allowed to be part of the peace talks. So I would be very curious to know, what does the majority of the Afghan population think? What are their red lines? I don't know. I'm a Swedish person. I shouldn't define them for anyone else. The Afghan people should define it for themselves. But of course, you would want to have access to a society that you have already today, at least. And the continuing war from the US, from the Taliban, from the Afghan government also, I don't know what credibility they're actually having the peace talks, because the bombings and the carnage are continuing at this moment. So, where is the will of having real peace talks? I don't know. If I was an Afghan, I would be quite suspicious of, or is there really any will to find peace in Afghanistan from the political elites? Yeah.
And I mean, there are also talks that are very difficult to monitor from a journalist point of view, both for foreign and local journalists, as you pointed out, Vali. But how? I will let Eric answer, but then think of a question: how can we support local journalists right now to monitor the talks and to give them strength to keep on reporting? But Eric.
I will try to answer that. I would just like to add to what Anna said with women's rights and the freedom of women, as Vali expressed it, and also media freedom. There are more women working as journalists in Afghanistan than ever before. There are more young women, like the young women I met at high school. They will be in the age of working now. Maybe they are journalists, because lots of young women in Afghanistan see journalism as a way to highlight the struggle and the challenges and the importance of women's rights. They see the media and journalism as a way forward to fight for these rights that they have gained, which makes them even bigger targets. Women journalists are much more targeted than the male journalists. So I would say that the peace talks, they are actually, it's about women's rights at the base, of course, but that includes journalism, press freedom also, because lots of women need this journalism to show what they have gained during all these years of struggles and what they need to struggle for more ahead. Talking about local journalism, I would say that what would be needed is that, of course, it's a tedious task, but I mean, we need the international community to try to influence these talks between the states and the Taliban, and also, I think, support journalists openly. And I mean, we could have the Swedish ambassador, I don't know, say in Kabul openly, publicly, we don't tolerate attacks on journalists. You need to open the doors. You can put pressure, the EU can put pressure. And what talks do they have with the States ambassador, the US ambassador in Kabul, to put pressure to open the doors for the journalists to report from these talks?
Vali, what are your thoughts? How can we support the monitoring of the process itself?
The only way is that US and VIA have to make sure the Afghan people, especially the journalists, there will be not deal in peace process against the freedom of speech and freedom of media, and they give allowed for the journalist members in peace negotiation what is their concern about the future, because you know at the period of the Taliban there was no free media, freedom of speech, human rights, freedom of women. Even listening music and watching TV was crime. Now it's very new. I got the report from a local radio station in Ghazni. Taliban doesn't allow the women journalists to doing their job. They stopped entertainment program in Ghazni. Only they are broadcasting Taliban's propaganda and Islamic programs. It shows Taliban are freed from freedom of speech. You know, freedom of speech is the power of the people. They are afraid of that because that they want to make it limit. So the only way is that the journalists have to involve in peace negotiation. Otherwise, we are going back. And recently, when the Taliban published their treatment against the Afghan media to stop your advertising against the Taliban and supporting the government, they mentioned me on Twitter, Wali, after 1 week, we will see you and your colleague in Afghanistan. What's it mean? You're really afraid of freedom of media. They know Afghanistan has big changed than past, especially young generation. They don't accept the Taliban's activities and their war.
Yeah, there's a whole generation that grew up. I mean, after the Talibans. Do you think that this generation can be a key factor? Yeah.
Yes. When a person was born after the Taliban, today is 18 years old. He or she knows better than past. They don't want to go back. They need freedom of speech. They need peace, and they need a good democracy. Democracy, freedom of speech have taken biggest victims of us. Last year, 15 journalists were killed. And this year, only in 6 months, 5 journalists and media employer has been killed in Afghanistan. And today is the last day for the Taliban's deadline. Maybe they will attack on journalists and media in Afghanistan. In each part of Afghanistan, we have good achieved and about citizen journalists. In each part of Afghanistan, the Afghan people, especially the young generation, use social media, Twitter, Facebook, and they have good cooperation with Afghan journalists. They share updates from each part of Afghanistan that media cannot cover their part.
No, that's, I mean, the amazing things, as you say, to be inspired by that. Though the killings and the risks on journalists, there are so many people still trying this profession and paying this price so we can get the news from all parts of the country. Anna Ek, from your perspective, how can we support these journalists, many young women journalists, to choose this profession at this time? What can be done?
I think for Swedish committee's part, what we can do is to continue. Let me just take a step back and remind ourselves of why free media and press is important for the peace talks. Many Afghans are still illiterate. The number of children who go to school has increased year by year, and we have a generation that is more well-educated than many earlier generations before in Afghanistan. But I think and that is why radio and TV and so on is so important, because if you can't read and write, how can you even get the full idea of what the peace talks are about if you can't listen to a radio or see a TV station? But what SEA will continue to do, of course, is to stand up for the right to education, to keep building schools, to keep educating teachers, to keep providing education for girls, so that they later on can become journalists. During my last visit to Afghanistan, I went to a remote area in Bamyan in the western parts, and I went to a school that we, SEA, constructed together with the local community. And I always ask, what are your dreams for the future? Do you have a profession you would like to be? And one thing that inspired me this time is that there are actually women and men, of course, also, but women who said, I want to become a journalist. I want to become an engineer. I want to become a lawyer. I want to. There is a progression going on in Afghanistan that the Taliban won't be able to take that away from them. They may try to restrict whatever happens, but I mean, the education that has taken part during these years, it will not be erased.
Trying to sum up, if we look a year from now, we have been, painting both a dark picture, but also trying to be optimistic. I mean, we have elections this fall. They might play into this process as well. And many say that we should embrace for backlash. But I mean, listening to you it seems like it's not necessary that we go that way. Just if you could say some final words, what you would hope for if we stand here in a year from now, what in the situation would you want it to have changed?
I hope doesn't happen anything wrong in Afghanistan. You know, for now, most of Afghan higher level officials are young generation. But the young generation don't want to deal on their life and their country. But our concern is that on peace process, Afghan people have to involve in this peace process, peace talks. Afghanistan hope in coming 2 weeks, start Afghan peace talks between the Taliban and Afghanistan government. But if it's happened, that will be really bad for Afghanistan. And also, we hope peace talks doesn't impact on Afghanistan presidential election. If does, that is also not good news for Afghanistan. We have to vote and select the new president for Afghanistan, for new programs for Afghanistan. If peace process impact on presidential election, that will shows Taliban are more powerful than Afghanistan government. They will involve in Afghanistan system. And Taliban are more powerful than Afghan military. They don't want Afghanistan Republic of Islamic. They want Afghanistan Emirate in Afghanistan. They didn't change anything. Just they want to continue their own system, which is very dangerous for Afghanistan after 18 years. Right now I'm working on a investigative report about the Taliban fighters and ISIS fighters, foreign fighters. I found very dangerous reports about the Taliban fighters, fighters number, which shows from 60,000 up to 100,000 Taliban fighters are active inside Afghanistan.
And
that shows Afghan military are 352,000.
Yeah.
Yes, but the Taliban fighters are about 100,000.
And that is also something that many are warning that it might be a tactical game, that after some kind of peace treaty they would pick up their guns again and after the US withdrawal, for example. But we need to, Erik...
Just I want to say very short.
Yeah.
The Taliban peace representatives, they called, we will destroy the Afghan military. We will active or we will controlling Afghanistan by my own fighters, which are Taliban.
Yeah. You have 1 minute each, yes. Erik and Anna, to look ahead in this year.
I would say there's no... It will be absolutely impossible, which you are actually implicating, to have a sustainable peace without press freedom or women's rights. I think that's not sustainable. I would hope that we, in a year, have seen sort of the first killer of a journalist in front of a court or in jail even, stopped impunity. And also, I would like to see more networking. Talking about Colombia, when the warring parties attack one media or threaten one media, other medias pick it up and do the same news. So you have a supporting network where you take each other, you protect each other's back, and you show that this journalist or this media is not alone. We are working together to take on these attacks.
Of course, I am fearful of what might happen, but I still decide to feel hope, because as I've mentioned several times here, every time that I meet the Afghan population when I visit, I get hopeful, because there is a so strong will to find a peaceful, to find peace in the daily life. I mean, Afghans are like us. You want to have a job, you want to be able to go to a doctor when you're sick, you want to see a good future for your children. And my wish is that maybe we try to not only scrutinize the warring parties in Afghanistan, but also try to raise the voices of the civilian population. What are their wishes, their demands, what are their red lines? That is, if I could make a wish for the coming months.
And that is something we all can contribute to. Thank you so much, Anna Ek, Erik Halkskär, and Vali Aryan for sharing light on the situation. Thank you all for attending the seminar, and thank you all watching. Over and out.